Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, good morning, Jane.
Please type yes or no on the Q&A window so I know whether you can hear me or not. Good morning, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our very first webinar in AGRA. This is a part of the learning series that you are cordially invited to participate in. AGRA does a lot and has a lot of expertise in-house that is highly recognized worldwide. As part of the knowledge management within AGRA, we are inviting all of us to consider this as a very effective way of influencing the way business is done by understanding what we do, what we have, and what we are capable of. We shall be reaching out to you to participate in future webinars. Please remember to ask your questions using the Q&A chat window provided. The presenters will answer your questions after the presentation. So the presentation will be 30 minutes, followed by 30 minutes of Q&A. The presentation today will focus on commercialization of smallholder farming systems, challenges and opportunities. This is part of a book published by the Islamic Bank and to which our presenters today and others within AGRA contributed to. Join me in welcoming our presenters today, Dr. Fadel Ndiame, Deputy President in AGRA, and Ones Karuho, who is the Head of Markets, again in AGRA. So over to you, Fadel and Ones, and good luck.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you, the entire production crew. Fadel, thank you very much for accepting to join us today. As Jen mentioned, today I will be discussing the commercialization of smallholder farming systems. Fadel, when you hear about commercialization of smallholder farming systems, what does it actually mean, and what is the position of AGRA on this issue?
Thank you, Honest. Thank you, Jane, for the introduction. I think this is really a very important question. But I think my starting point would be the raison d'etre of AGRA. If you go to our website and look at the, how AGRA's mission is defined, it literally says AGRA exists to fulfill the vision that Africa can feed itself and the world, transforming agriculture from a solitary struggle to survive to a business that thrives. So the first reason why this theme is very important is at the heart of what we have been set out to do. And clearly, it's behind this effort is a vision that smallholder farmers who currently are actually linked to the markets, but in a very weak position. Basically, when they buy at the retail cost, which typically is more expensive. When they sell at wholesale cost because they don't have storage, so they have to sell to they are basically price takers, to use the jargon. And the consequence of that is poverty has a face, it's a rural women. Therefore, driving commercialization is to make sure that agricultural value chain are structured in such a way that smallholder farmers can really benefit, improve their livelihood, make money, along with other players in the value chain. So in essence, it's really a call for shared prosperity, but that is also inclusive. And I think the challenge for AGRA and other organizations is how do we do it in an effective and sustainable way. So I'm very happy to join you in this, and I want to recognize your leadership in really framing that chapter of a book that really examines cases that goes beyond what AGRA does. Back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Fadel. So in a nutshell, what I hear from what you have just said is that our goal is to serve smallholder farmers, but they will not remain smallholder farmers. Our aim is to make sure that we have a critical mass of commercialized smallholder farmers. Now, we know that smallholder farmers operate in a very complex systems with multiple stakeholders and different transactions and so forth. Can you a little bit describe this type of environment and factors that make it work for smallholder farmers?
Yeah, thank you. I think the starting point, I mean, the baseline, to use our own jargon, is smallholder farmers we're talking about are small and they are scattered all over the place, which typically mean from a business point of view, they are very difficult to serve or to do business with because their transaction costs are very high. So the best prospect for us to succeed in helping them make more money and become more viable and invest in their livelihood in their farming is to make sure that they are part of more lucrative chain that bring together a set of players from input producers and dealers, farmers, traders, processors, consumers, and in a way that we satisfy what the consumers are willing to pay for. Value is created by the willingness of a consumer to spend the money in order to acquire a good and a service. And even though you have many type of market systems, the most promising one, and the one AGRA and others are really focusing on, is to make sure that conditions are created for smallholder farmers to participate in this lucrative value chain and contribute to managing risk, creating value for everybody in the chain to operate and have a benefit, a tangible benefit from their effort. Obviously, as you know, honest, this, even though the focus is on those key players, they don't operate in a vacuum. They operate in a landscape where you have all the support function and services through the provision of capital, technology, equipment, and mechanization services, you name it. But all of this is operated within an environment in which government, industry association, business development services, and infrastructure create an environment that enables this type of arrangement to work. So it's a complex ecosystem that needs to be managed in order to get the kind of results that we're trying to achieve.
Father, thank you very much. We all talk about market-led kind of work, market-led systems and so forth, but the point you've just made really drives the message home that everybody is focusing on the final consumer. We create value, everybody creates value for that final consumer. As a matter of fact, if we take an example of maize flour in Kenya as a product, we know that 1 kilo, the cost of 1 kilo may be 56 cents at the supermarket. Everybody in the chain, from smallholder farmers, transporters, retailers, millers, and so on, they are looking at that money and try to create a value that will help them to capture that value, but also create that value. So there is a concept of value creation, but also how much do you capture from that value in the value chain node you occupy. So this is a very good concept that can help everybody to be mindful when they select a value chain to focus on. They needed to understand who creates value and who captures what value. in actual sense, that's the analysis we should be doing, to look at what everybody is spending and the value that they are creating, but also what are the payoffs or the profit they are making that makes them continue to act. Now, for there, let's switch on to some of the models we have seen. I mean, you have seen it all from private sector angle, but also public sector and the non-profit sector. There are many models that have been piloted. Everybody is talking about let's commercialize the smallholder farmers, but not everybody does the same thing. Not everybody has the same approach to it. Can you describe a little bit? I know that you talked about 4 approaches in the chapter we co-authored, and maybe this is time to share with our colleagues, our audience, what we have seen, the 4 predominant approaches.
So, I mean, if we think about the ultimate goal, which is really to enable smallholder farmer we care about to be part of money-making value chain, we have to recognize that a lot of effort is being deployed by government, by NGO, and even by farmers themselves and private sector to make it happen. And what we have done when we look at those models is try to really assess them against 2 key parameters. To which extent can they deliver on the goal to really make sure that the smallholder farmers are in the market in a productive way, but do it at scale in a sustainable way. So that enable us, and this is really the framework you were talking about, to come up with 4 clusters, of intervention. And very quickly, I'll go through them. And we have concrete examples, you will see them in the book, which shows you how really they are contributing to the same goal, but they don't have the same impact in terms of really driving impact at scale. The first category is basically, let me start with that, and I think you have a very good example in the Zambia, Food Reserve Agency. The first example really encapsulates all the intervention driven by government with the view of promoting productivity, creating infrastructure for greater production, processing, providing subsidies, creating policies, really all of the effort that is being driven currently by government in order to make sure that the smallholder farmers are part of the wealth creation that we have described. Now, this is what we call A1 in the chapter, in the graph I'm seeing now. And it's, as you see, because it's government, this kind of intervention can be done at scale in a sense that a large number of farmers can benefit. If you do a policy, it affects the whole country. Secondly, government generally have resources to really cover large areas. So it does meet the requirement of achieving scale. The question is it sustainable? Very often it's not, because government has many other priorities. And when you do that, you are really not doing all the important mission of the government. So we take it note, it's a crucial one, it's an important one. It's very common across the continent. Within the same range, we also categorize what we call the NGO or farmer managed approaches, which basically try to address the issue of fragmentation and high transaction cost. Typically, if I go very quickly, they entail organizing farmers so that they can bulk buy and bulk sell. Remember what I told you earlier, one of the big weaknesses is when you go to the market and buy retail, and when you sell wholesale. You take a price, you are a price taker, and also when you buy, it's very expensive. And I think this is what is really fueling the poverty in the rural area, the double squeeze. So both NGO and farm organizations have tried to avoid this by bulk buying and bulk selling. I think we have many examples, including within AGRA. We have very effective farm organization. I want to think about the best one we found in West Africa, PFAB in Burkina Faso, Faso-Jigi, you name them, that are doing an amazing job of aggregating farmers, providing them with input, advisory services, and helping to take them to market. So they are effective. The question is now, are they sustainable? Because typically, they also depend on donor funding, and they don't have a business model by which people pay for the services. Now, the third category is now the one on the right-hand side, driven by business. This is all the agribusiness supply chain that we have been supporting. I think we have many examples in the book, and I think we can give the example of Yadent in Ghana. I have the example of Babangona, which is an amazing SME that is doing a social venture approach to unlocking value for smallholder farms. And I'll give a bit more example on the Babangona model. Quite promising, quite effective, but again, the question is, how do we scale it? It can be scaled, but it requires us to have proper franchising model, where you replicate the same model in different geographies. But the most optimal one is really what we call the system approach, which basically, and I think we have a very good example, it's really very similar to what the platform we're building as part of our consortium work, but also combined with our policy and state capability, which means the conditions are created for a set of actors to come together. They have the incentive to work together. They are fully aligned in order to deliver value, do it in a sustainable way, and do it at scale. Now, theoretically, these are 4 models. In practice, you have a lot of overlap. But we thought it was important to have a framework that enables us to categorize them so that we know, depending on what we're trying to do, what are the business models that are more likely to be successful.
Father, thank you very much. To the example of Zambia, actually, so they have a food reserve agency with very good intention of making sure that prices of commodities are stabilized and they buy from smallholder farmers. But the problem is the payment. So private sector grain traders are very quick to going into rural areas and move out in the production, but the problem is pricing, because they need also to look at the international pricing, the contracts they have in terms of export and so forth. Now, we need also, as a facilitators, we need to take care of the concept of time value of money. As a matter of fact, the FRA in Zambia was the price they were paying was 20% higher than that offered by traders, but the payment was being done after 6 months, and these farmers would go and queue up and spend a lot of time at the local bank to make sure they get their payment. So in the end, once you factor in the time it takes and the logistics and the travels, you see that farmers who sold it to traders immediately, actually in the end, their price was 30% higher than those who sold it to the food reserve agency. So the intention is good in terms of price stabilization, but the results are not always good. So we need really to keep in mind. I'm not sure if our colleagues in Mali are on the line, but they had a situation where farmers were refusing to sell because the price of maize were down. So, but again, we needed to figure out if they sell after 6 months or 1 year, what will be the price trends, but what will be also the cost of carrying that stock and so forth, and make a choice and show the calculations, be able to advise farmers accordingly. Now, Fadel, we know that you had a farm organization at heart, actually, and as a matter of fact, when you joined the AGRA, you had a big program called FOSCA. In one of the conversations we had before, you were saying that even though we have a distinct definition of farm organization and SMEs, in the end, when it comes to successful farm organization, there is no clear cut or clear difference between an SME and a highly performing farm.
Yeah, honest, I think this is really a very important question. Firstly, I think because you referred to the work we did before, I think a starting point that because we, as AGRA, we focus on smallholder farmers. Let me give you a few facts that we know. If you take 100 farmers across all our countries, and we test that during the first class, only 20% of them are organized. Basically, are the ones structured to be able to drive services that will add value to their members. But if you take, and we use our capacity performance index really to assess their capability along a certain number of performance. If you take the 20% that are organized, only 30% of those are really delivering the kind of services that enable their members to make money. And this is what the slide that we have here is really referring to. You can categorize them in 3 tiers. The first one is really informal farmers, club aggregation, which play a big role in many settings of really providing informal saving, doing some social work, etc. In our experience, those are about 10% in terms of significance. You have a big bulk of farm organizations who are, basically structured, formalized. A lot in West Africa are following the OHADA rule, which set the condition for farmers to access finance. And they do some useful service, formal saving, input supply. Sometimes they even take produce to market and they can provide loan. But very often they suffer from the issue of capacity. You have a third category that basically are SMEs, in a sense that they are structured, they have the capability to perform a much wider range of income-enhancing services. Saving, input, loan, asset loan, storage, processing. Now, typically what they are doing, they're helping farmers to move along the value chain to make sure that they have a stake or they play a role in adding value. Therefore, that will qualify them to capture a bigger piece of the pie you were referring to earlier. So in practice, this is why we're talking about tier 2 are SMEs. So the name itself doesn't, at AGRA, we generally oppose SME to farm organization, but they are all organizing platform. It's form and function. I think we should pay more attention to what are the key functions they are delivering and to what extent those functions enable smallholder farmers to achieve their objectives in the context of value chain. This is what we're referring to. And maybe
very well said.
Go ahead, yes, please.
Go ahead, finish your point.
When I was saying this SME actually really mimic very well the example I was referring to earlier through the Babangona model that actually through the soil health program, we supported a very innovative entrepreneur in Nigeria who came up with a model of basically providing a suite of service to a group of farmers, but in a way that enabled them really to have access to the input, to finance, to insurance, to storage, and to market. Everything that will unlock value. And from that, they are achieving 3 times the average in terms of yield and income in Nigeria. I think it's now a model that is being really applauded around the world. The question is, as I was referring to earlier, how do we take it to scale? But I think that gives us a great advantage. The point we're trying to drive home, the ideal situation is really where we move to the market system in which, and it really mirrors the work that currently our PDI and policy team, policy and state capability are doing to make sure that along specific value chain, the key function, input, market, finance, and policy system are properly scrutinized, assessed to identify the bottleneck that needs to be unlocked so that you create the condition for a delivery of a commercialization that realize the potential of achieving impact at scale. And I think you have in the book few examples that you can talk to yourself. Back to you, Alex.
Very much. To that point, we can actually transition to this system where you have platforms, and we've been piloting these platforms to make sure that
Are you there?
Okay,
all right. Okay.
People who, okay. So we have all the players that are aligned and they have a visibility on the business venture or the commercial venture they are pursuing. Two key considerations is assured market for output, but also access to improved inputs, and you have highlighted it, that access to market and other services that help farmers to succeed are the key function of or key advantages of having an ecosystem approach to commercializing smallholder farmers. The crucial role played by off-takers. We've seen that in the cash crops industry, many buyers or traders actually, they are the key nodes that make sure that farmers have access to all they need. And we have been using the same concept to ensure that off-takers of staple crops are also able to work with the entire ecosystem to make sure that they have access to factors production, but also finance and also ultimately the market that provide them with the profit. Our inclusive finance team have been piloting this in many countries, including Tanzania and Ghana. We have an example of ADVANS in Ghana, where off-takers are key because they can speak to financial institutions and have a deal and make sure that farmers that are included in the supply chain and have access to finance. The entire system is old because of that willingness of an off-taker to provide the signal to the market and to input providers, finance providers, technology providers, that there is actually a market and it's profitable. Everybody can play and have a share into it. So this is an example that is very popular, that is gaining traction in our focus countries. Now, further, let's switch on to agribusiness platforms that we are creating in several countries. We always say that the government has to play a role, but also private sector. Can you talk to us about these two partners, government and the private sector? What is the role, the ultimate role they play in ensuring that farmers are commercialized?
Yeah, I think the key word here is really, again, when we refer to the platform as really an aggregation of players who share common objectives and who are in it in order to make money together. For this to happen, the key word is you need to be able to de-risk. Some of these players have a profile in such that their value as it is now is low, but they are faced with big risk. That is typically all the farmer-facing function, especially around extension, around infrastructure, etc. That's a key government function. But also because of you have some incentive settings that are involved, the policy and the regulatory environment may create the incentive for the insurance and the guarantee for some of the more commercial players to start working with smallholder farmers to make sure that they are part of this value chain. So I think at AGRA, the reason why we insist in this platform to be able to deliver all these functions from extension to agro dealership, to input, to finance, is to create those conditions for a proper de-risking in which government play its role, private sector will bring the capability in terms of management, in terms of insight on what the market is looking for, but also the ability to unlock finance. I mean, you mentioned in your prior statement the role that the traders and the aggregators are playing in securing finance, because they have much stronger balance sheet. Banks perceive them as more reliable, but they see that in their own interest, it is important to make sure that smallholder farmers are producing quantity and quality. Therefore, this is part of the really risk-sharing facility that enables them to create wealth and share it. I think one of the success factor when we see it is even when AGRA leaves and you see repeat transactions, you see people continuing to work together, it means we are getting it right. I think the essence of our role here, I will call it, is like an orchestrator. We have to make sure that we can anticipate on all the potential dysfunctionalities and make sure that by working through government in making sure the right environment is in place, working through the private sector to make sure that they are properly de-risked to make sure that this kind of agribusiness platform is operational. And I think it's probably one of the most promising models that we see in the market in terms of ensuring inclusive, competitive, and resilient value chain. Back to you.
Well said, Fadel. I like your point on orchestrating all the transactions that are going on with the farmer organization within their own framework. Now, we have a few minutes left, but let's build on that point and talk to our frontline people. I'm talking about our country teams, especially APOs and POs. They act as a transaction advisor, and we need a lot of data to be able to make sense, but also play a role of that head of orchestra that is, kind of a symphony that will allow everybody to play their part in a harmonized way. Can you a little bit discuss the importance of data and capturing data to make that system work and also be able to influence the action of key stakeholders?
Thank you, Ernest. And this is probably the greatest value proposition of AGRA when we do this and we do it well. Remember, we are dealing with an ecosystem with players who are different in terms of their objective and their capabilities. And what we're trying to do is to facilitate their engagement in a way that you have an alignment of incentives, but also you minimize their risk. Part of the role that AGRA can play is if you take the production process and subdivide it into 3 stages, the pre-planting phase, you have a number of players whose involvement in the value chain depends on the visibility they have in terms of what will be produced, what will be the quality, what crop, and who is willing to buy it. So this is a set of information that, because we are decentralized, we have people on the ground, we have partners, we have made some investment ourselves, collecting information and data on that inform the demand, potential demand, and the supply of produce and input is a crucial information that has a lot of value for off-takers, for input dealers, for financial institutions, but also for AGRA management and government, so that we know, for us to make sure that the investment we are making are working, are we providing the actors the right information? So I want to highlight the crucial function that our team on the ground are doing by providing those information. After planting, obviously, because you're dealing also with market players, they need to have visibility in terms of who are the off-takers who have confirmed their order. If you already know, what are the prices that we are anticipating given the level of production? How much working capital is available if somebody wanted to get involved into off-taking, processing, etc.? And now that we are more advanced in the season, do we have visibility onto the anticipated level of production? This information is crucial for the category of actors that you have on the right-hand side. Producers need to know it, off-taker needs to know it. Just give an example. If I'm an off-taker, I probably have already secured some order from my retailers. But if I know that this year they are likely to be a failure in production, I can look for another mitigation plan. The key here is information enables them to be ahead of the curve. Through our market readiness report and the production forecast, either we are doing it or we have partners who are doing it, we have a significant value proposition for these players. Finally, I want to end at the last stage of harvest and post-harvest, where issues around supply logistic plans are crucial. Do we have an idea of what are the delivery schedules? What are the existing financial products? What are the required working capital? This level of information is crucial for the players. So in a nutshell, what I'm saying is, what qualifies AGRA to be this go-to partner or to be the orchestrator? Yes, we are an African organization. We are not only the only African organization. The value added will come from our ability to generate that insight on a timely manner and to able to provide action-oriented, actionable information to the key players who are part of the value chain or part of the broader environment that we are talking about, including government. The COVID-19 pandemic showed the value of information, our ability to know which region is at which stage of their season, what are the risk profile, what are the possible information. This is what makes you an orchestrator, is able to match need for information with available information. So I think this is really the crucial role that AGRA, through our whole setup, we are playing. And I think this is where we need to build a greater muscle and capability so that we increase the competitiveness of our work. Thank you. Back to you.
Father, we can't thank you enough. Thank you very much. And dear listeners, we have come to the end of this webinar. And we will not leave before we interact with you for your contribution, questions, and the clarification. Now it's back to our production crew. Jen, take it away.
Thank you, Ones and Fadel, for a very informative and fruitful presentation. We now move to the next session, the Q&A session, and we have many questions. I will read out a few, maybe two at a time, for you to respond. And then the ones that we won't be able to get to, you'll still get them for you to respond to the individual attendees. Now, our very first question comes from, and just one moment here, from Tadele. His question is it possible to take a blended approach that includes farmer organization, agribusinesses, and the concept of system approach? And again, from Tadele, understand the inefficiency challenges of farmer organizations. How do you make them more effective in providing the market support to smallholders? Okay.
I think those are great questions, and maybe I can give a start. Firstly, I think great point, Adele. Maybe I didn't highlight it enough. None of these approaches are mutually exclusive. In fact, in reality, it's a mixture. But I think the key word here, as you move to the more systemic approach, is really you have a tighter, more structured, more organized system in which government and private sector work in tandem. So they are not mutually exclusive. And I think this is really the ideal we are aiming at. So looking at the farm organization, the second question, and Ones can provide more examples. I think if you take the example of Tanzania, where you have an export ban, what it took, the kind of effort it took for this to be lifted and create an enabling environment really involved many, many players. So it's not either or. I think we did the framework just to provide a basis for assessing different models and the strengths and the weaknesses that come with them. Farm organization, we actually did a lot of work, a lot of assessment, and I think one of the important tools that AGRA has built in partnership with AfriGrowth in South Africa with Professor Bigpay is a capacity performance index that I think we need to revisit as a way of really being able to assess their capability in terms of management, inclusivity, the scale of operation, and the type of business model. Based on that, actually the diagram that we showed the 3-tier, recommend a coaching approach. For each segment, you have a set of intervention that is possible to do in order for them to improve their performance. And we have over the year, we have been able to track through the IPPT. I mean, my friend from MNE should be very happy. We saw how over time, some farm organizations have improved their score over the year. And I think a similar methodology would be very relevant for the SME we are working with now. Because even though they may be more advanced and perform better, they still have capacity challenges that can be improved through the proper application of the tool. Unless you may want to add, especially to the first question.
No, actually, the second question, Tadere asked about the inefficiencies of farm organizations, what we can do to make it, more efficient in providing market opportunities to farmers. So I don't intend to repeat the history of cooperatives and farm organizations in many countries. So it was a very good avenue for access to market and other services as well. But as you know, there was a political interference because that was a very good venue of aggregating votes as well. But all in all, what we are promoting is what Fader talked about when he was discussing tier 2 and tier 3 models. It's all about being business oriented and make sure that cost of transaction is reducing rather than increasing, because if you look at the cooperatives and their P&L, most of the time farmers are reluctant to use that channel because rather than reducing the cost of transaction, it increases because of overheads and stuff like that, and efficiencies in terms of being business savvy. So rather than building organization cooperative just for the sake of having farm organizations, we're focusing on deals that are clear. We are producing this commodity. There is a market right there. Let's see how we can tap into that market. Again, there is a whole host of issues of being more activist rather than business people. And you've seen many organizations are saying, you've got to pay farmers higher prices without looking at the cost of production and also the value captured, as we showed in our example area. And
maybe, honest, if I can add, just because we spend a lot of resources and time in farm organization. The model we use, Tadele at Agra, was really based on what my colleagues, I'm sure Pauline and Olive are listening because they were part of the FOSCA experience. We refer to as the 5 V's. Given the reality that smallholder farmers are our key clients, we needed to have a business model to help them really create businesses that are lucrative. So the first V is voice, creating opportunity for them to articulate their needs, to be able to talk, and this is where the activist part, generally honest, comes from. Because if you don't participate, if you are not loud, nobody will pay attention to your issue. So we can't dismiss it. But from the voice, you need to make sure that you build the capability to generate the second V, which is volume. When you aggregate the needs, instead of everybody going and buy 1 or 2 kilos of fertilizer, if you come together, aggregate your need, you become more attractive for even businesses. Then that leads you to the third V, which is value. Because you are a volume, you are predictable, people will see value in you and will start working with you. I have an example that currently we are dealing with one African bank who is trying to have an estimate of what are the needs in terms of seed and fertilizer. But they are looking for an aggregator that function. The fourth V now is you are visible, you have voice, you have volume, you have value, you have to be visible. I think this is where all the engagement around advocacy, which is very important because remember, we are also dealing with policy and political choices that are being made. If there is nobody who is doing advocacy for farmers and smallholder farmers, it's not going to be heard, irrespective of the business rationale. And the final V has to do with the viability, which talk exactly to what Honest is referring to. So if you have those 5, I think you have a recipe for supporting farmers create their own vehicle that eventually will make them part of really the real creation of wealth, and that lead to shared prosperity that we aspire to. Back to you, Jane.
Thank you, Fadel. We have 2 questions from Nuhu. He's asking, what is a commercialized smallholder farmer? And also he says, Honest just mentioned advising farmers accordingly. This is a key gap. We need to double down on what he will call market extension service. How should we do this?
Honest, I asked you to take the most difficult question. You can take this one from my brother.
Thank you, Nuhu. Thank you for the question. And actually, Nuhu has been advocating for a different approach to value chain development and the commercialization of smallholder farmers. That's what he calls a reverse extension. Nuhu, I think the next or sometimes when you have time, we can have another webinar on reverse extension to ensure that everybody understands what you want to promote, which I agree with. Nuhu all along was talking about before even a farmer takes action, he should understand the end market first for them to make sure that they recalibrate their cost of production, they know the choice of commodities, given the potential for profitability and so forth. So I don't think it's a question you asked, it's actually elaborating on what you've always been talking about, and I think it's a high time for AGRA staff to understand that and they put that into practice in terms of making sure that farmers, they know what they're getting into, what type of commodity they should produce, in what quantity and what quality, and because of what the market is signaling. So I take that as a contribution to this discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe if I can add something, my brother Nuhu. I think just to highlight the idea of a reverse extension or reverse linkage is really the same idea of being driven by the market. The people who are closer to the consumer have a better understanding of the quantity, the quality, and the timeliness requirement of the consumer. Therefore, they can command the rest of the chain. It's really, Nuhu and I, we refer to a firm-led consortia at some point, which basically means you need to have a captain who's able to interpret and absorb the signal of the market and therefore manage the group in a way that enables us to optimize the value for everybody. So I think it's along those lines. And in the context of this book, and to your first question, we're referring to successful commercialization is really making sure that smallholder farmers are part of lucrative value chain, are adding value, contributing to creating wealth and reducing risk. Because the SME and the off-takers and the millers will not produce if they don't have access to paddy. So they have to play their role in be part of that chain we're talking about. But I'm sure, to honest point, you are making a point that we need to emphasize more. We have to be more driven by the market signal to create the condition for sustainability in the long run.
Great, thank you. Next set of questions from Foster. He would like an explanation of the system's approach to achieving scale and sustainability. For him, this is where AGRA is struggling to unpack. It would be great if you enlighten the audience.
Yeah, now Foster, you know, you and I come from the same school where the question is more important than the answer. So I think you're making a real point. In the larger scheme of things, I think what Foster is talking about, given our ambition to drive impact at scale, if there is one league where we should be playing, which one should it be? And I think the real answer is we need to be in that system place, where through our influence and our support to the key players, not only government, but also private sector, also donors, we are creating the condition for this value chain to operate and be driven by the players. And I think that's the optimal position that we are aiming at. And it echoes what our president used to say. I mean, generally, people think the problem is we don't have enough resources, etc. The problem is governance of the chain. So the problem is not a lack of resources, it's lack of order. The question becomes, how can AGRA use all its resources and its insight to influence the way business is done? It goes back to what you're saying, Jane, when you introduced this session. It's not so much about what we do, that's quite important. But if we want to take up the challenges of delivering, producing food at scale, tackling COVID, dealing with resilience, all of the big issues, we will have to play a role of a better orchestrator, and making sure that the conditions are created for players to de-risk, create the incentive, and deliver at scale. Thank you, Foster, for the contribution.
Let me also comment, Foster. This is a key issue. when we advocate for market, the systems approach, it's not only to have good seed, good fertilizer, have access to market, but it all the subsystems. So where is the analysis taking us, given our ambition? So which means we needed to take care of all the subsystems that will make these things work. I mean, manage, we have a market program, and we start implementing it, working with this of the force only to, which means whatever you've been in a brokering will be done. So, and access to finance, regulations, logistics.
Honest?
Okay, you're back, Honest. Okay. I think the line is failing us now.
Technology and so forth. So without taking care of systems, there is no chance of success.
Yeah, I think the point is, Honest, your line is failing. I think we anticipated that. But basically the point here, Foster, is we understand all the requirements to have a well-functioning system in which you have an alignment of incentives. You also have the enabling condition for the value chain operators to work together, manage the risk, and create wealth. Now, to give an analogy that will make you laugh, Foster, it's like if you have a dog. I mean, I love dogs. Very often people try to have the tail move the dog. They try to engineer things. What we are saying, a system approach is just create the condition for the dog to move its own tail. Because they have eaten, they know what they want, they can take care of themselves. And I think if we are successful in the orchestration role, we will figure out how to design a system and incentivize it to work in the with the minimum effort, with a guarantee of being able to deliver results at scale. That would be basically the analogy I would use to refer to that. This is the ideal space for Agra. I agree totally with Foster.
Thank you, Fadel. There are many questions. We will continue reading them until our time is up. Question from Jennifer. How do our case studies on commercialization compare to models in other parts of the world? What can we learn from those models?
Great question. I think, again, Jennifer, because we don't have time, we actually compile in the chapter case studies from all the regions of the world, including Asia. But the principles are really the same. I think the successful model combines a pull, push, and policy factor. We have a case where it was about managing water scarcity in Asia across several geographies. Now, our colleague Abed provided an exciting case study in Kenya where farmers, especially a widow, was really part of our soil fertility management, the program. Over the year have been able to increase their yields, to generate enough revenue, and with that to improve their livelihood. But to take it to scale, you really need to have a platform by which, that was an element of a push. The pull is what Honest and Nuhu are referring to, which is make sure that the logic and the system is driven from the market end. But you need the last P within the policy. This will not happen in a sustainable way at a scale if you don't have an enabling policy environment, if you don't have the regulation and the supportive investment from government for this kind of arrangement to work. So the short answer is it's not only reduced to Agra's cases, you will see it's really a global cases. It's a case, we have case study from across, the 157 countries that are served by the Islamic Development Bank across 3 continents. And I think we'll send you a link to the book, and I invite everybody not only to read the chapter that was co-authored by Honest and I, but there are other chapters co-authored by IFRI, by the FAO, and other colleagues who have deep insight and knowledge around issue of value chain development.
Right. Our next question is from Dibon. There is always an issue of trust between smallholders and private sector. How do you create and maintain trust?
Honest, you want to start this? I will come.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dibon, for that question.
Yes, yeah, we've been discussing this with Fader, a few moments ago, and it was all about this repeated transaction concept. Once a farmer or farmer groups and a stakeholder, a buyer, have been engaging in a transaction for more than 3 seasons, chances are they understand each other's businesses and they care about each other's, and they can continue to do business. So as much as we can in Agra, we needed to, one of the success factor in our work is to foster those repeated transactions between producers and buyers. Fader, do you have additional comments?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, but I think basically it's a relational issue. It's a factor. It's probably the most important factor in any engagement that involves several parties. Typically, it takes a lot of listening and communication. It takes getting clarity on what are the value. I mean, the way I would simplify it is, it helps if the whole group, through a facilitation, share a vision of what does success look like? When we have succeeded, what will happen? So there is an element of no surprise. Secondly, it's important to have a very clear articulation of what are the principles. Solidarity, we will support each other. Reliability, no side selling. That has to be talked through. And the third pillar for me would be around accountability. How do we make sure that we work together and become mutually accountable? Now, over time, you can be very deliberate in creating those. Alignment around vision, key value, but also it's about business. You have to deliver. I think there is no substitute as time, as Honest is talking about, repeated transaction. So as you do it and do it and do it, over time people will see that it's a serious, and then it will grow. And this is why you may not, when you start, you may have to start small with a smaller group. And then success will breed success. But I think you have to have it in mind as you design this setup. Thank you, Dibon, for a great question.
Right, our next question is from Sunil. Quite often the transportation cost from farm to retail markets is quite major share of value that is taken by transporters. How local governments could be encouraged to address this issue?
Honest, that's your question.
Yeah, I mean, everybody else, it's not cultural, but I think it's everywhere. It's the question of what's in for me. So as much as we can make a case to the government, as we ramp up our interaction with the government to ensure that there is an enabling environment for businesses, or especially agribusinesses, we need also to ensure that governments understand what's in for them. I mean, as much as possible, if you invest in the core infrastructure, you can probably look at what it means in terms of tax revenue, and what it means in terms of the well-being of farmers, all the core issues that the local governments or national governments care about. Once clearly articulated and showing the payoffs, government will take action. And this is what we've been doing, our policy and state capability teams, looking at the core investment in the high impact areas, and make a case to governments that you will be better off investing in these areas because of these benefits. Not only the well-being of your constituencies, but also in terms of tax revenue that will come in to help you become more financially independent, but also provide services to your constituents in an effective way.
Great answer. And I think I just want to reference that we actually have concrete cases where, and I think Boaz and Pucheri and Burema in Mali, where the ask from the minister was, how can I redirect the resources, the significant amount of resources that are being given to my department, away from fertilizer to invest more in rural roads, in small irrigation, etc. I think it fits what we were talking about earlier, really around everything that will de-risk, that will help to make the system more efficient by enabling the private operators to do their job and contribute to delivering high quality products to the consumer. And I think this is where the competitiveness challenges of our countries come in. Infrastructure, good infrastructure, will reduce significantly the time it takes to move product from one area to the next. And that's a case for the PPP approach that we are really all promoting.
I think we can take two other questions. The next question is from Vanessa. Which other partners, multilaterals and technical, are working in this space? And from Thierry, what is AGRA's unique value proposition in comparison to other actors working in the same area of work?
So to Vanessa, I think just again, the question is the answer. I think and part of this work was really to, if you look at the book, we are actually referencing a significant amount of work that USAID has done around value chain development. And I think the broader, not only USAID, but other partners have done a significant amount. John Mashari had asked a question earlier. I know prior to joining AGRA, he was part of a very, very effective organization doing this type of work. So many other partners. It's not about, even though we take example from AGRA, we are not referring to that we are probably the best in it. Actually, the chapter and the book illustrate other practices. And I think, and that I want to relate it to Cherry's question, where is AGRA's comparative advantage? I would say, in addition to our identity, because the way you position yourself is extremely important, to the extent that we acquire the trust of government and other players. I think our strength would be to be really the orchestrator we are talking about. Because you have trust issue, we are not conflicted here. We are not selling anything. So I think this is why I'm really building that AGRA's brand and our capability to reach out, listen to, and convert the capability that in the system. That will be key to AGRA's really becoming the go-to place. And I think significant part of that for me has to do with our ability to mine, process, manage actionable information. This is why people will come to AGRA, because they have other places, but I think the fact that we are not only distributed across geography, but we spread from the farm to the African Union, and we have a way of linking to the whole ecosystem of players. We just need to have a very effective converter that can convert resources into needs, to be the player that does that connection. So I think it's enabled us to clarify that positioning that Terry is referring to. The honest.
Well, I think also expertise in the core systems, in developing ecosystems of agriculture. I mean, there are a few organizations where you can go and really find that expertise in many systems. And where we do not feel that we have that expertise, we have a provision of partnerships, which is the department that Vanessa is heading, in terms of indirectly making sure that those issues are being addressed. I'm talking about issues relating to infrastructure, for example, partnerships and other things. But in terms of core agricultural systems, our comparative advantage is that we have expertise in-house and the right relationships with the government and private sector, as Fadel alluded to.
And perhaps our very last question is from Esther Ibrahim. Pricing is usually a challenge to selling to off-takers. What do you advise?
Well, the issue of pricing, yes, it's a key one. And in most of countries, we do not have effective price discovery mechanism, and which is the selling points of organizations or infrastructure like a commodity exchange and and warehouse receipt system. However, as Fadel and I emphasized on a kind of repeated transactions and the relationship between off-takers and producers, it's a key issue for AGRA as a facilitator to ensure that there is a price discovery mechanism that our partners are using. It may be localized, it may be reference market minus logistics, but somehow we needed to have a way of communicating to partners the prevailing price mechanism and how it is calculated. Fadel, any addition?
Yeah, I think that's basically. I think again, a price again is a signal. It's a way of really conveying what the market is, thinking, what people need and what is available. And to the extent that you are in a tight relationship with the trust factor, people can actually accommodate a lower price if through larger volume and more constant, more repeated transaction, they can make up a larger revenue. You can have a high price for one transaction and then you are out of business. A lower price will get you also out of business. But the value of having this platform where people really have visibility on is everybody winning, create the opportunity to make the price more secondary as part of the broader relationship. It's an important element. I think as AGRA and partners, our biggest influence would be on the cost of production. Can we help reduce what it costs to all the players to play their part? And this is why the work we're doing through technology with PDI and others, the work we're doing through policy, making sure that there are proper investments, all of this is creating the condition for lower cost of production. And the work we're doing, listening to the retailing part of the chain, will make sure that we understand the quality requirements. I think those are the key parameters that make sure that as a team, we continue to manage risk, create wealth, and share wealth in a sustainable way, which is what we're trying to achieve here. I realize we have not answered all the questions, but I think we are very happy to take them on and provide our contribution. Again, for me, the questions are more important than the answers. And we will share the chapter, and you will see for yourself some of the references, and probably it's an ongoing discussion, but I'm very happy that we are talking about it now. Back to you, Jane.
Yeah, thank you very much. We have come to the end of our presentation today. Perhaps just a few seconds, closing remarks from our presenters. Fadel.
Thank you. Firstly, I have to thank Honest, and I have to, when I was asked back then by Bashir Jama, who knows us very well, who knows the potential at AGRA, whether we wanted to take up this, I knew that within AGRA we have the expertise and the experience and the data really to do this work. And for me, it really illustrates how we can help provide leadership in influencing the way everybody think about this area. So I'm very happy, I'm very proud that this was done. I'm sure that and I want to thank you, Jane, for providing the platform for us to mine the resources. You have an amount of wealth at AGRA. And I think going back to Cherry, I know he's really prompting me something. I think the real value of AGRA is the value of its people. The challenge to us as leaders of AGRA is how do we create the condition for all of you to bring out your value in a coordinated way so that we can contribute to the new African narrative. So I'm really happy. I'm a big fan and champion of these activities, and I'm sure that you will find within AGRA other colleagues who will do similar things. I want to thank you, Jane, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Fadel. Honest?
Yeah, thank you very much for organizing this webinar. And mine is an appeal to all the areas we have in AGRA. We should be able to schedule such webinar in core areas from partnerships to state capability to policies to other system areas. So I appeal to all the heads and the VPs really to organize such webinar because it allows us to inform people from afar and from Nairobi, and probably we will go outside after we have organized our messaging, and we can go out and inform the whole world about our work and our approaches to solving smallholder issues. Thank you very much, and it has been a pleasure being with you.
Right. And from us, we'd like to thank all those people who attended today. Most importantly, the production crew, Ben Imo from ICT, we couldn't thank you enough, Alice, and all the other people that participated in this. Thank you very much. We'll let you know when the next webinar will happen, maybe in a week's time. Thank you very much, everyone. Keep sending your comments, questions. We will avail them to the presenters and they will respond to each one of the questions. Thank you.
Thank you. You're celebrating live.